So we're ready to put the eyes, glue them on. There's a couple of ways we can do this. You can use the old CA glue or super glue. Line up the eye, put a drop on it, boom, you're done. However, what happens later on is you're going to put another coat of epoxy on top of it. So inevitably, when you use that CA glue on that eye, there's air pockets underneath. And that air is guaranteed it wants to come out, and it'll come out relatively slowly. So you've got to watch as your lure is turning on the spinner and continue to pop those bubbles. Now, with any luck, you get them all. However, I've walked away from lures on the spinner that I've been popping bubbles for 45 minutes, and I think the bubbles are gone, and I come back 2 hours later and there's a bunch more bubbles. And of course now the epoxy is hard enough that you really can't mess with it, because if you touch it with anything you'll make a long string. And so what I decided to help me in this process is I use this Gorilla 5-minute epoxy. Now you might say 5-minute epoxy, well that's going to maybe move around a little bit. And the answer is yes, it just might. But it's your job to make sure that it doesn't move around. So what happens is rather than countersink these eyes into these sockets, I like to have my eyes right on top. And what that does is if I fill up the eye socket with 5-minute epoxy and then put an eye on it, it makes the eye a little bit proud, which is what it should be, because every minnow or sardine that I've ever seen, they always have bulging eyes. So I can kind of accomplish two things. I can get my eye set properly, and I can remove that air that's trapped under there. Now, would you get it all? You won't get 100%, but you'll get a good 95% of it. So the first thing I do before applying any glue or mixing any glue is I take my 12mm eyes for this. I'm going to put this one aside here. We're not going to do him right away. And I put that in there. Now, I make sure that it fits right, because the last thing you want to do is put in a bunch of epoxy and then all of a sudden the eye doesn't fit. Okay, so this one fits just beautiful. Now normally I would do 2 eyes at a time, but today I'm just going to do 1. I'm also going to have a little bit of a prop here to help slant the eye properly so it doesn't, so the 5-minute epoxy doesn't run away. And basically you got to use whatever you got handy that will do the job. So here we go. So I use a piece of cardboard with some tape on it. And the reason I do that is I can use this same piece of cardboard many times, and all I do is take the tape off, so just a couple cents worth of tape. Alright, so I'm going to put a little bit of glue. You don't need a lot. Mix it up real well. And I'm going to be timing this. I want to know where this epoxy is. So it's 5-minute epoxy, and it, it, it stiffens at 5 minutes, but it doesn't really harden until 10, maybe even 15 minutes. So I've got a timer there just to keep me aware. And what I'll do is I'll actually watch this thing, make sure it doesn't slip. Because I have had one that slipped and it was very annoying. Well, what I'm going to do now is put the epoxy in the center of the eye. Work it around. Now, if you should happen to put too much, you can take it out. Now, as I put in the last amount of epoxy, I work it around the edges. So this is how you get rid of those bubbles that form. You fill up everything under here as best you can with epoxy, and then when you've got it all filled up, now you try not to spill any epoxy on the edges, but the truth is the next coat of two-part epoxy that we're going to be putting on here will in fact be exactly the same shade as this 5-minute epoxy, and it will be absolutely invisible. So just so you know, this is not as delicate an operation as some of the other things that we do here. Okay, so now I've got the eye in approximately the right location. I push down in the center of the eye, and what happens is a little ridge of epoxy forms around the eye. That's a good thing. Again, what I said before is the next coating of two-part epoxy will take that away. So now my job is to watch the time. So we're 2 minutes into this, and really what I have to do is watch that eye, make sure it doesn't slip away. So watching an eyeball is not exactly exciting. I'm going to speed this up, and what I've got here, I've done the other two that we're working on, and these are hard now and they're ready to go. So just to give you an idea what they look like when they're all done. And I just love that they're a little bit proud. They're just a little bit of a bump. All of these lures are now at the stage where they've had 2 coats of two-part epoxy, and it's time to talk a little bit about options for the lure. What do I mean by options? Well, I mean things like the circles around the eyes. That's something we've already put on. During this last coat of epoxy, I snuck in some very nice speckles in the tail. And I have a little story about that, it's very short. I was out at the lake testing some deep diving lures, and the lake, freshwater lake, the lake was very, very clear, and I could see down to about 15 feet very easily, and I was looking over the edge of the boat at one of my deep diving lures, and I was admiring my work and looking at the action and doing all the things that you need to do when you're field testing a lure. I didn't notice it at the time, but the sun was actually behind a big cloud. So as I'm watching this lure, the sun comes out from behind this cloud. And all of a sudden, the speckles that I had put on that lures started to flash. My goodness, that lure looked like an ambulance going to an accident. And from that point on, I decided that all of my lures were going to have speckles or sparkles, whatever you want to call them. And so adding sparkles to the tail, of course, the tail has got the most motion, and it's going to give you your biggest bang for the buck. You could put sparkles all over the place if you wanted them. But I really only put them up, inch and a half off the bottom of the tail. So what you do is, after you've added that second layer of two-part epoxy to them, you pour out about half of the remaining clear epoxy into a little jar, and then you add the sparkles. And you got to be a little careful, because too much sparkles is not good, not enough sparkles is not good, so it's got to be just right. And the reason you use a separate container for the sparkle is you'll be watching these lures for the next 45 minutes, and every once in a while you'll come up across an area perhaps that you missed with the current coat of epoxy, and you'll want to put some clear stuff on there. But if you've put sparkles in all your clear stuff, you can't do that. You're going to have a splotch of sparkles. So this happened to be the second time I did this, and I realized that after that I'm going to always have some clear epoxy and some clear epoxy with speckles, so I can do any kind of small repairs that are needed. So that's why you see sparkles. So we're gonna put these three away for the moment, because we're mainly focusing on this 6-inch. So here's a 5-inch from Greg Buds, and this is kind of my go-by. And I just wanted to talk about the other possible options, and of course you can do whatever you like to these lures, because they're yours. If you were to take this lure right now and use it, it would be fine. It would catch fish. The action would be fantastic. But lure makers want to add a little bit of themselves, and maybe it's showing off a little bit the details that they can add to these lures. But as a lure maker, when you pick up one of these lures that you've done very well, you're very proud of them. So let's look at some of the things that we can add as options and enhance the look of the lure. So we're going to talk about the side fins, and we're going to use one of mine that I've done. So this is a rather large lure. I think it's it's probably 8 inches. So you want to do your options in a way that they don't interfere with each other. So one of the common things that people do, and Greg does this as well, is he may paint his side fin mostly yellow, light yellow, And one of the things I really like is this color stripe, and I can show you how to do that. And in real life, where this fin comes in right here into the body, that's a fairly meaty area, because that fin, of course, has to be operated with muscles. And I like to put a shadow there because there's lots of stuff happening there, and it just kind of finishes off that area. Another option would be to put a bit of shadow right here. You spent a lot of energy putting this gill in, and rather than kind of cover it up and hide it, it seemed like a good idea to put a bit of shadow on it, and I can show you how to do that. Another real life thing is the red underneath the gills. That's supposed to represent gills, and that's a very common thing that you see when you've got minnows and they got their gills up a little bit. You'll see a little stripe of red, and that's a very interesting addition to put on. Gotta have a steady hand for that. The last thing is kind of the side dots. So Greg's lure here is a pilchard. Now, a pilchard actually has these dots. I've been looking for a good picture of one, and I can't find one. But putting on these dots is kind of interesting. It uses an interesting technique, and I can show you how to do that as well. Actually, once you have the template, it's extremely easy to add a row of dots.